if you're aware, but people are kind of preparing for a hurricane that's supposed to hit in this area. So the turnout is very low, but we're going to move forward because I'm sure people want to hear Mutaki Akbar, who, like Kumba said, was the lawyer for Jesse Neville in the Uhuru 3 case. So with no further ado, we're going to ask people to stand for the African fight song, and then we'll hear the video from the FBI raid on July 29th.
Shout Uhuru for our freedom. We are ready. We'll dance and sing songs like revolution won. We are ready. Africa's best daughters and sons. Patrice Lumumba's life won't be in vain. We are winning. Keep up the work in Marcus Garvey's name. We are winning. Independent and free is what we will be. We are winning. Africa will bask in our victory. We are winning. Long live the liberation of our African nation. Freedom through organization. Socialist world, our creation. 1 billion strong, yes, we are one. We are winning.
This is the FBI. You have a federal warrant for this address. Keep your hands up and follow orders. This is the FBI. We have a warrant for this.
They handcuffed me and my wife out here. They wanted me to sit on the curb while they were carrying this out, something that I refused to do. They wanted my wife to sit on the curb out here, that she refused to do.
As I was coming out, this big old drone met me.
The only revolutionary organization that's done something here on the ground practically for African people is the one that's come under attack. Institution that offers a community radio station, a newspaper, a commercial kitchen, an Aquaba Hall rental space, and community office for our organizers. That was the building that has come under attack.
Need a breach? What do you need?
They want.
I don't know.
I'll tell them that money. Don't take it.
We will build a movement of white people that says hands off the Uhuru movement.
They see in the African People's Socialist Party a vanguard for the struggle for the liberation of our people. They see that because not just what we do here in the United States, but because we had the temerity to do like Garvey, to do like Malcolm X, and take the struggle of black people around the world.
Kenya, do you know if Mutaki is on yet?
I don't think I can
St. Louis, do you know if Mutaki is on yet?
He's not on yet.
Okay, he's not on yet. So I just wanted to appreciate comrade that did show up. There's some very difficult weather in St. Pete right now and all of Florida, actually, west central part of Florida. Hurricane Kirk is supposed to be hitting directly on the west coast of Florida, right? St. Pete's supposed to be in the center, and it's going to go across the state of Florida. But we wanted to hear from Attorney Akbar because one, the very rare occasions that the federal government brings charges and you actually can defeat, even if you can defeat one of those charges, is a very rare occasion. And in this instance, the dream team, as we call it, Mutaki Akbar, Attorney Mutaki Akbar, Addie Griffin, and Leonard Goodman, and Tom Inskeep, and Ms. Rainey, Angelina Rainey, were all instrumental in handing the government a very serious defeat on what they call a substantive charge of working as Russian agents. As you know, the indictment against the chairman, Malaysia Telepenius and Justin Neville, stated that they were working as agents of Russia without notifying the Attorney General. These frame-up charges were knocked out of the water. However, we did get a conviction for conspiracy. Doesn't make any sense, but it was a conviction for conspiracy, the less serious charge, but it does carry a 5-year sentence, maximum sentence. So we are trying to fight back against this, and the sentencing, by the way, is going to be November 25th. That's a Monday at 9 a.m. in Tampa, 801 North Florida Avenue at the federal courthouse. So we are currently in the middle of a letter writing campaign. Yesterday we had a webinar where we call on people to write letters and show them what should be in the letters and what shouldn't. It was very successful. I know dozens of letters have come in even before the webinar yesterday. And, several people have texted me and told me they turned in letters as well. So I'm hoping everybody that is looking online will go to handsoffoffword.org and pursue that letter writing. It doesn't have to be long. It could be one paragraph, half a paragraph, and just stating that you would want to see Chairman Wallace tell Penny Henson, Jesse Neville, able to continue to do the work that they've been doing, particularly the chairman for 60 years and Penny for 50, and Jesse for some 10 years. By the way, the letters do have to be separate. You have to write one letter for each of them, so you can't combine it and being sentenced, by the way, separately. So the chairman's hearing is at 9 a.m. on the 25th, it's a Monday. Penny's hearing is at 10 a.m. Monday, November 25th at 10 a.m. And then Jesse Neville's hearing is at 11 a.m. on Monday, November 25th, all in the same courthouse on the 15th floor. I think it's courtroom 15B. So we have to mobilize as many people as possible to pack the courthouse. That's what we did for the trial itself. The courthouse is packed every day, and I think it had a large part to do with what we were able to do in terms of getting one of those charges, a not guilty verdict on one of those charges. What was that key? Oh, at 4:30. So at 4:30, we probably shouldn't be too far from 4:30, but in 8 minutes, we're going to bring on Mutaki Akbar. He'll be coming on to talk about free speech and talk some about some of the cases of free speech that he has been involved in and other lawyers have been involved in that have really had an impact on the whole question of free speech. All over the United States, the state is attacking free speech. Many cases being brought now around this FARA charge and also around 951, which is working as a foreign agent without notifying the Attorney General. Of course, conspiracy is a catch-all charge that the government uses to, if they can't get you on that, then they say, well, we can get you because you were planning to do X, Y, and Z. So we feel like this was some people call it a split verdict, we call it a compromise verdict. And we feel like the jury, while they were determined to get a not guilty verdict on the substantive charge, we did get a verdict of guilty on the conspiracy. We do plan to appeal the conspiracy charge. This could take some time to complete, but right now we're in sentencing mode, so we have to fight really hard to get this sentence to the place that we want it to be, where they can continue to be out to do the work that they've been doing for many years. So we're going to take a 2-minute break, and for culture, I think Mutaki's on there. Okay, he came on early. You're early, Mutaki. So,
no problem. You can take the break. That's fine.
No, we're not gonna do that. I know you. You're the one we've been waiting for. So
Okay.
we definitely want to hear your presentation, and we can wait. We got a little food here, but we can wait. Hopefully you're getting prepared for this hurricane too, Mutaki. It looks like it's supposed to hit directly on St. Pete and go across Florida, but hopefully everybody's getting prepared. It looks like people are really scrambling in St. Pete to get prepared. But, we want to really welcome Attorney Mutaki Akbar. He was the attorney for Jesse Neville in the Uhuru 3 case. He has been practicing law for many years in the city of Tallahassee, and I understand he was also in West Palm Beach, I think, as a public defender for a few years. But he has really grown into a lawyer of great stature, and I think he's going to be the next great movement lawyer. He certainly did a great job in the Uhuru 3 case. I think he had as much to do with this win as anybody. And I think Jesse was very satisfied with the aggressive kind of defense that we put up. So, with no further ado, I want to introduce Attorney Mutaki Akbar.
Uhuru, everybody. Thanks for allowing me to give a brief presentation. Just about free speech and how it's been attacked in courts. One of the things that I did was just kind of put together a summary of some instances, I guess like throughout history, where freedom of speech has been attacked. And as we all know that the First Amendment, it reads that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So when the First Amendment was implemented, of course, we were not considered to be free. We were not considered as a part of who the Constitution was for. And so early on, it was pretty obvious that the right to the freedom of speech was not applied to Africans who happen to be in America. So throughout the years, it's been a direct assault when Black people, you could go date all the way back to the revolt of Nat Turner, revolting as a slave, to even Dred Scott decisions and all of those things. I think we can submerge the idea of freedom of speech into that. And the idea was when with slavery and Nat Turner was how dare you speak out against your freedom, speak out for your freedom, and how dare you take that extra step and fight for your own freedom. And so even some critical race theorists look at even Brown versus Board of Education um, as the Supreme Court's own undoing of the denial of free speech when it came to education, and desegregating schools, because the idea was that the segregation of schools spoke to racism and hate, and the Supreme Court thought they were undoing this idea that of racism and by desegregating schools. So if we look at history, we look at cases, we look at all of those things. Free speech is embedded in all of that. So one of the things that I looked at is just who has or what organizations have been attacked on the basis of what they were saying, and not only what they were saying, also what they were doing. And we can start this conversation with Marcus Garvey, who's an obvious victim of a political trial, an obvious victim of an attack on his freedom of speech. And so when we talk about Marcus Garvey, he was indicted and tried in 1923. And his indictment was for mail fraud. And he was ultimately deported in 1927, deported back to Jamaica. So Garvey served almost 3 years of his 5-year sentence that he was sentenced to for mail fraud. And so Garvey came to Harlem back in March of 1916 after founding the UNIA in Jamaica. He established a weekly newspaper called the Negro World in 1918. He held weekly meetings at Liberty Halls, where meetings were the meeting places that served as community centers. They had dances, they had classes, and they posted about jobs and housing. He had soup kitchens that fed the hungry and temporary dormitories that housed the homeless. I'm sure this all sounds familiar to you all. He had grocery stores, 2 restaurants, a printing plant, steam laundry, several buildings, and trucks and ultimate equipment. But the ultimate goal of the UNIA was the redemption of Africa from European control. His ultimate financial goal was the Black Star Line, which was a network of steamships. He offered shares of stocks at $5 per share, and within a year, he raised $610,000. And remind you, that's in 1916, 1918. The company did not become successful as fast as he wanted it to, so he began to sell his stock through solicitation by mail. This solicitation through mail led to his arrest and his ultimate conviction. There was hostility towards Garvey among Black leaders, but there was also extensive government surveillance of Garvey by the government. One FBI agent wrote that Garvey was without doubt one of the worst insiders in the United States today among the Negroes, who I believe would do almost anything for him. If there should be any race trouble in New York at any time, there is no doubt that Garvey is, quote unquote, sowing the seeds now for it. He was under suspicion as a communist infiltrator or sympathizer, but when it was determined that he was not a communist, the investigation turned to gather information on Negro agitation or Negro radicalism. So that gives you the basis of what this investigation was all about. So because we can argue in the same that we argue about the Uhuru movement, because he was having these classes, he had community centers, he was posting jobs, he was feeding the hungry, he had restaurants, he had printing plants, he had all these things that he was building community with, and ultimately raised a huge sum of money. That was the problem. And the other problem was that he was, quote unquote, sowing the seeds for racial agitation. In other words, he was waking Black people up, and not only waking them up to the the racism that was going on around them, and waking them up um, to the power that they had within their hands. He was also empowering them, the same way that this movement is. He was empowering them, and as a result, he was brought under attack. And so that attack, that those criminal charges that was brought against him, which was, for mail fraud and failure to pay taxes, was only an attempt to silence him. And so people that studied this case, they saw that the government's, I guess, burden was to prove that what he was doing was fraudulent, that he was asking for these stocks, he was asking people to pay into this company. They had to show that it was fraudulent, which, if you look at it, it wasn't. But the studies showed that the trial was unfair because they were targeted only to silence him, and they were ultimately successful in doing so by getting that indictment, by getting that conviction, and ultimately deporting him. So that's like one of the first early examples of the attack on the First Amendment by somebody who was not only a leader, but somebody who was using unique ways in order to wake up Black people in New York and abroad, by using the newspaper and by using all the tools that he had at his hands in order to wake us up. And it's interesting that when we talk about some of the Black leaders that that he didn't get along with or that was attacking him, one of those leaders had the same fate that he had, but ultimately won. But as far as the indictment, had the same fate that he had, and that was W.E.B. Du Bois. And in 1951, Du Bois was indicted, arrested, and arraigned in federal court as an agent of the Soviet Union because he had circulated a petition that protested nuclear weapons. And so so his charges were very similar to the charges of the Uhuru Three, because they said that he was working as a Russian agent because, well, not as a Russian agent, as a foreign agent, because the petition that he circulated did not originate in the U.S. I believe it originated in France. He was ultimately acquitted because prosecutors failed to present any evidence. The prosecution, however, ruined his career. In 1952, the State Department illegally revoked his passport to stop him from traveling to a peace conference in Canada. Du Bois had a long history of anti-war activism dating back as early as 1913. Du Bois' focus was not on peace treaties and legal bans, but on highlighting the cause of war was due to colonial aggression and imperial expansion. Again, sounds very familiar with our movement. In 1945, Du Bois launched a petition to the undemanding human rights for African Americans. In 1950, Du Bois was named chairman of the Peace Information Center, an anti-war and nuclear non-proliferation organization headquartered in New York. This organization published a newsletter about international peace movements. The goal was to foster global cooperation. The organization circulated the Stockholm Appeal, which was the petition that we referred to, which called for the ban on nuclear weapons. It received 2.5 million American signatures. It was this petition that caused him to be indicted for failure to register as agents of a foreign power because their petition began in another country. He and other members of the PIC were indicted. Prosecutors offered to drop the case if Du Bois pled no contest. Du Bois' witness list included Albert Einstein, and he also planned to testify on his own. The government called a former member of the PIC who testified that members of the PIC were Soviet puppets. Du Bois did not have to call any witnesses, and he did not get the opportunity to testify because the judge ultimately found that the government failed to present evidence of the PIC's Soviet ties. In other words, if anybody paid attention to our trial, at the middle of it, we moved for what we call a judgment of acquittal. So at the point where Du Bois moved for a judgment of acquittal, pretty much saying that even if you believe everything that the government is saying, they still haven't presented a case. And what they found in Du Bois' case that he did not have that there was no ties to any Russian government or any foreign government at all when it came down to this petition. As afterwards in 1958, that's what we refer to, Du Bois' passport was revoked and he lived in exile in Ghana, and that's where he passed away. At the time where Du Bois was indicted and went through this federal trial, he was 83 years old. Again, sounds very familiar as far as what we're dealing with as well. At this same time, around the same time, it was the Red Scare, the Communist Scare, and everything, and that was, mainly the attack on Du Bois at the time, which was similar, although it was not a criminal case, but another person in history that we could look at that was an attack on free speech was Paul Robeson. In 1948, there was a bill that was proposed called the Munt-Nixon bill. And this bill would have required all members of the Communist Party of the United States to register with the Attorney General. The bill died in the Senate in 1948, but in 1950, Congress overrode that presidential veto and the Internal Security Act became law. As a result, Paul Robeson's passport was revoked. Paul Robeson was not only a prominent actor and singer in the mid-20th century, he also used his celebrity to advance peace, democracy, and equality around the world and became one of the most well-known advocates of civil rights and organized labor. As a result of his passport being revoked, he lost many speaking and singing engagements. This attack on Robeson sent a message to the American public about what types of speech were acceptable. Robeson was told that he could receive his passport back if he refrained from making speeches abroad. Robeson then sued the State Department for the return of his passports. One of the counts of his suit was the State Department violated his First Amendment rights by stating, if a citizen is to be permitted to travel abroad only when he echoes views pleasant to the State Department or any other government agency, his right of freedom of movement and of speech is severely restricted. Robeson ultimately lost his appeal in 1955, but his passport was ultimately returned in 1958 after the Supreme Court ruled that the State Department could not deny a passport based on a citizen's political beliefs. Robeson, like Du Bois, was an advocate for not only peace and anti-war, but he was also an advocate for labor unions. He was an advocate for all types of civil rights. And, one of the things that he, even when testified in front of Congress, he, raised his freedom of speech right and not conveying to Congress or anybody else what his party was or who his party was or what he stood for, because he strongly believed that was his First Amendment right. And even though this was something that affected him economically, it affected his reputation, he still stood on his right to free speech and his right to identify with any party that he chose to. And his story, along with Du Bois, was one that ultimately showed that he was standing on the right side of history by doing so. And whether you believe in communism or being a part of being a part of the Communist Party, what was important to him was the right of a person to be a part of the Communist Party or any other party in the United States. And it also showed the effort that the government would go through in order to silence that free speech as well. And we can't talk about the history of an attack on the freedom of speech without talking about the Panthers. And one key, trial involved what was known as the Panther 21. In the Panther 21, in 1969, 21 Black Panther members were indicted. The number ultimately dropped from 21 to 13. They were charged with conspiracy to kill several police officers, and to destroy a number of buildings, including four police stations, 5 department stores, and the Bronx Botanical Gardens. They were indicted on 156 criminal charges. They ultimately had an 8-month trial, which was the longest and most expensive in New York State history at the time. Famous Panther Afeni Shakur was one of the Panther 21. Pregnant and with no legal background, she chose to represent herself. During her cross-examination of one of the undercover agents, she got the agent to admit that the activism that they had done together was powerful, inspiring, and beautiful. The Panther 21 were acquitted of all 156 charges in May of 1971. Shakur and others spent 2 years in jail. A month after her acquittal, her son, Lassane Parrish Crooks, was born. A year later, Lassane, was renamed Tupac Amaru Shakur. Other political prisoners, past and present, include Mumia Abu Jamal, who spent over 40 years in prison. He was a journalist that covered the police persecution of the MOVE organization. Jalil Mutakin, he spent 49 years in prison and was released in October of 2020. Assata Shakur, who was in prison and is now living in exile in Cuba. Fred Hampton, he was silenced by death. Kamau Siddiqui, 14 years in prison. Angela Davis spent years in prison and having to try her own cases as well. Bobby Seale, 4 years in prison, and the list goes on and on. In an effort to dismantle the Black Panthers and organizations similar to the Black Panthers is also an example of the government's use of COINTELPRO and other tactics in order to, again, silence and hamper the free speech of organizations who seek to not only, again, empower the Black community through programs such as the free breakfast program and the after school programs that the Panthers were doing, but also empower Black people to believe in our own power and to not be apathetic to segregation, not be apathetic to racism, and not be apathetic to living as second-class citizens. And because of that, they were attacked, not only physically, but also by reputation and all other tactics in order to silence them, and again, to take away that right to freedom of speech. One thing that the Panthers did in order to fight back on this attack on their freedom of speech in, I believe it was around 1977, 78, around that time, Huey Newton and other members of the Black Panther Party actually filed a lawsuit against the United States, against the Department of Justice, and against several people who held office, including the postal inspector, the head of the FBI, the head of the CIA, and several others. They filed a lawsuit, and in that lawsuit, they made several claims, and those claims included that the government with the they complained of unlawful mail openings, warrantless wiretaps, and break-ins and burglaries. They also contended that the government, with the assistance of local law enforcement agencies, harassed and even assassinated party officers, members, and supporters. They further suggested that the government had incited dissension within the party through use of anonymous letters, paid informants, and agent provocateurs. They alleged that appellees also instigated violent confrontations between the Black Panthers and other Black organizations. Finally, they claimed that the government deterred contributions to the party, crippled the party newspaper, the Black Panther, and discouraged press coverage of party activities and sabotaged the party's public service programs. In their lawsuit, the party and Newton each asked for $50 million in compensatory damages and $50 million in punitive damages. And this lawsuit ultimately was vacated and dismissed by the court. But like in just reading through the opinion that from this case, you can see that the district court, which would have been the trial court, went through several different legal tactics in order to not let this case even make it to the courts. They ultimately dismissed the case because they claimed that the party and Huey Newton failed to answer certain questions when the government sent them those questions. They said that they failed to disclose other party members who were not made public. And again, the party raised a First Amendment objection to having to disclose those party members. And the appellate court actually initially stated that it was illegally dismissed, and then when it was brought back, they ultimately dismissed the lawsuit. But I thought it was interesting that the lawsuit was filed once. First of all, I thought it was interesting and a really good tactic to file the lawsuit, because even in losing that lawsuit, they were able to, what we said, like put the government on trial. They were able to show with proof, and the lawsuit was based off of a Senate report. And in that Senate report, a lot of those allegations were mentioned in that report. And in that Senate report, they talked about, COINTELPRO and how organizations, not only the Black Panther Party, but other organizations were under attack by the government by using COINTELPRO, by infiltrating the organizations, with agent provocateurs, by poisoning those organizations with drugs and other things. And so they used that report, they used the government's own evidence in order to file this lawsuit against the government. And again, it showed the way that the government used its own powers and their ultimate powers in order to, again, silence an organization and step on their right to freedom of speech. So historically, it's there. Historically, we see, from Garvey to Du Bois to Robeson to the Panthers, and we can list so many other organizations that our government is no stranger to silencing its citizens when it comes to dissent, when it comes to speaking out against what our government is doing. And so I think our case, dealing with the Uhuru 3 and what's going on now, is a prime example of that. And we're not only seeing that with the Uhuru 3, we're seeing other indictments now as we speak in real-time action under the same 951 that's being used now for the federal government. One of which is a media group that's based out of Tennessee. It's claimed that they are working with a Russian media outlet that's being state controlled. So that indictment is very recent. And what we're hearing now for people who like Marco Rubio and other people who are saying that these media groups and these organizations are doing things that they've always done, and that they had no idea that the Russian government was behind those groups. But what we're seeing, the same way that we saw in our case, that this is not, and I talked about this in my closing argument, that this is not about specifically, and I think there are reasons why they attack certain people, but what it's about is this war against Russia. And this fight against Russia, and they want to say that they're fighting Russian psychological warfare and Russian disinformation, but they find certain groups that they want to attack at the same time in doing so. And so when we look at the UNIA and we compare that to the Uhuru movement, when we talk about the Black Panthers and we compare that to the Uhuru movement, that it's almost kill two birds with one stone type argument. And when I say that, what I mean is that you have the ability to silence an organization who have programs for children, an organization who's looking out for the recently incarcerated, an organization who is building community, who has a farmers market, who has stores, who's building our community economically. If we can silence that organization from doing those things and building community and building economic empowerment, and at the same time silence an organization who's empowering Black people socially as well, to be able to speak out against injustices, to be able to be on the front lines of protests, and whether it's 2014 and 2015 or 2020 or even 2024, if we can silence those organizations as well as say that we're fighting against Russia at the same time, that's that's a huge, I guess, like win, or could be a huge win for the United States government in that particular situation. And so I think that both reasons are the reasons for the attack on historically what we've seen, excuse me, from the attacks on these people that we went down, but also these present day attacks on organizations such as the Uhuru 3. Why is our case so important? I think it is the next question when we look at it historically, and also when we look at it, in a present day sense. One thing that Du Bois wanted to do, and one thing that he did, and what I think the Uhuru movement did at the same time, is that in the time from indictment to trial, Du Bois went on a speaking tour where he crossed the United States, speaking out not only against his indictment, but also what his indictment was about. He published newsletters. He, wrote editorials every time he got a chance. He had a witness list, and I mentioned this before, that included Albert Einstein, where Albert Einstein would come in and justify his, the fact that nuclear weapons, how destructive they are, and why we need to fight against them. And he also made it clear that he was going to testify in his trial. And when he testified in his trial, he was going to talk about the attack on his freedom of speech. He was going to talk about his anti-war stance and how he's been doing that work, for 40, 50 years prior to him being tried. And it was known that he was going to do that. And a lot of people's, when you talk to historians, they believe that the judge kind of decided to dismiss the case before he had the opportunity to testify on his own behalf and call somebody like Albert Einstein to the stand to back him up, as a quasi effort again to silence him, to silence that speech, which is ironic in that sense, that he gave him a win to silence him even more. And so when you look at our case, and in that same context, what was done between not only indictment to trial, but also the and I won't even call it a search, the attack on the Aquaba Hall, the attack on the houses, the attack on the Uhuru 3 or 4 at the time, with these searches, with this intimidation, with these flashbang grenades. It shows the historical context, and I'll get to our part of it, but the same way that Garvey's indictment, Du Bois' indictment, Robeson's taking away his passport, the Panthers indictment, the purpose was to send a message that, hey, you need to say these things. You can't say these things. And so the way that the government came into the house of the chairman, the house of Jesse, the house of Penny, and the community centers was to send that same message. They didn't come quietly on purpose. They didn't knock on the door and say, hey, come on out, we got the search warrant, sit silently. They didn't say, hey, you could just sit over here. They use, the zip ties, the flashbang grenades, the breaking windows, the, barging in the doors. That was a part of the message that they wanted to send, to say that this group are doing some things that we don't like, and you should not do those same things that we don't like. So that was the message, and it's the same thing, historically. But the response to that, I think, is equivalent to the response that we've seen again historically from the Panthers, from Du Bois. The response to that was that we still would not be silent, which is important. The response to that was we are still going to talk about the things that's important to us. Yes, we said that Russia was in the right to invade Ukraine, and here is why. Yes, we believe that imperialism is wrong. Yes, we believe that colonialism is wrong. Yes, we believe that the attack on Black people in 2014 and 2015 was wrong. And here's why we put this petition out there in order to say these things. So the movement didn't stop by the search. The movement didn't stop by the indictment. And the movement didn't even stop by the trial. And that's important in order to say that the freedom of speech is fundamental. And even as an organization who holds the government to the highest standard, an organization that is critical of the government, this organization still believes that the government should stand firm to what it asserts. And standing firm to what it asserts is saying that freedom of speech is freedom of speech, no matter who's speaking it, or no matter what that person is speaking of. And so, just like historically, with all the organizations, and we haven't gotten to the point of filing our own lawsuit like the Panthers, but that assertion stood strong throughout the trial. And as a part of our our defense, we wanted to make sure that that assertion stood firm. So we talked a lot about, should we kind of silence some of our viewpoints, or should we silence some of the things that we stand for? Would people think we were wrong by saying that Russia was in the right, and by attacking Ukraine, or not necessarily attacking them, but by defending themselves against Ukraine, if that's our stance? Or are we in the right for saying that police attacks on Black men is genocide, and we're charging America with genocide? How much should we pull back on that in the trial, because maybe a jury just wouldn't accept that, or they would fear us or not like us enough in order to say that that was wrong, or that we shouldn't say those things? But we stood firm. We stood firm to that, not only as our First Amendment right, and not only as our beliefs as well, but also the same message that they try to send to say, don't say these things. We thought it was important to send a message that we should be able to stand firm to the things that we believe in. And again, the same way Du Bois was prepared to, the same way that the Panthers did, and the same way that so many other organizations continue to, and not how some other people and organizations kind of step back and move away from that idea. So the irony is that an organization that's so critical of the United States, again, it's using its own weapon, the First Amendment, to continue to hold the United States to what their ideals should be, which is important. And to withstand that attack in a way where we were able to, beat the more serious charge in this case, and hopefully, at the end of this, continue with our freedom and to be able to continue with our work, I think is extremely important to send a message back to the government that, not only do we believe in the First Amendment, but we have jurors who believe in the First Amendment, and ironically, jurors who look nothing like the people who we fight for, but they still understand the importance of that. And so, no matter what we see historically, and no matter what we will continue to see in the future, I think it's important that we still stand firm to our principles, and to our beliefs that we have the right to speak out and to say whatever we to say what we believe in, as it pertains to the First Amendment. And so why is this win historical? And why is this win important? If you look at the statistics in 2022, it was said, I want to get it right. In 2022, about 0.4% of federal criminal defendants went to trial and were acquitted. 0.4% went to trial and were acquitted. And even though we got a split verdict in this case, I think we fall within that 0.4% that went to trial and were acquitted. And so the government, knowing that power, knowing these statistics, throw everything at us, throw everything at anybody that they bring before them, because they believe either one, that they're going to back down and just take a plea, or two, that once they get in front of a jury that they will win because the statistics says so. And so the fact that we were not able to give them that win on calling this organization or members of the organization Russian agents, I think is significant. And it's, again, just like with the boys, just like with the Panthers, it is a testament to what freedom of speech is, and that we have to continue our fight, not only for the organization and the things that we stand for and the work that we're doing, but our fight for freedom of speech as well. So that concludes, the presentation on what I wanted to speak about. And if there's any questions, I'm more than open to answer them.
Very important. And we're going to take questions for a few minutes. Is there any questions in St. Louis? I don't see anybody. There's one person up the phone.
I think they're muted.
Can you hear them one time?
They're muted.
They're muted. You have to unmute yourself in St. Louis.
Okay, are we coming through now?
Yes.
Okay, questions for Taki, and just appreciate your work for having with the whole movement. But my question is related to the whole thing with the how you say, probation. If found guilty, and it looks like, well, not guilty, but I guess, but it looks like who may be on probation. Does that also mean that their passports will be taken, or they will not be allowed to travel outside of the country? And what are some of the stipulations that will come with that 5-year probation for this?
More than likely, they would be required to stay in the country while they're on probation, which is not something that's abnormal for somebody that's on probation. And it could even limit their travel outside of the district where they live in, but that'll be up to the courts to determine what that limitation would be on that. I have not seen where they can limit the speech or anything that they're saying, but they could say, no traveling to Russia, or they must get permission before they travel anywhere outside of the United States.
Uhuru, we do have one more question from the audience. One of the Uhuru 3 herself, Penny has.
Uhuru, Penny.
Wanted to say, wow, that was such a profound presentation that you made. That really gave a whole history, gave an incredible context around, the struggle for freedom of speech and what it really means, what the challenge was that anti-colonial freedom of speech in particular. And I hope we can really, take that presentation and put it on our websites and really get it out, because it gives just a wealth of information, of history, of the whole context for the, for the attack on the party legally and on Chairman O'Malley Shatella and politically, and what that means. It's very, very helpful, and I just really salute it. So thank you so much for.
Thank you, Penny.
Okay, we have a question in St. Pete.
Uhuru.
My question is regarding, I know that the judge and I know there's even been some discussion regarding the fact that this conspiracy charge is unprecedented in the sense that not knowing what to do. Do we have an idea outside of the sentencing, like what normally happens when there's like these kind of split verdicts?
We don't. This situation is a bit different because, we spoke about it before. There are no guidelines in the sense of us knowing, like typically there'd be some guidelines and we say, hey, you're looking at 0 to X amount. Since it's not on the guidelines, they're still looking at 0 up to 5 years, but there's not, I guess, like a cap on that as far as what we're looking at. So we don't know. Historically, if somebody doesn't have a criminal history, it's a nonviolent crime, technically a victimless crime. Typically I see somebody getting probation for something like this. We did see, I guess, some people in the same courthouse was involved in like graffiti or criminal mischief, and a few of them got like some short jail sentences. I think one of the people went to prison for graffiti based off an abortion protest. So we don't know, to be honest with you, and I think that's why it's important to get these letters out, and to show up, and for us to tell the whole story in order for the judge to get a clear picture of what not only the organization is about, but also what the Penny, Jesse, and Chairman O'Malley, what they are about as individuals, in order to tell the court, like, hey, even if you don't like what they were doing, or even if you feel like they were a part of some conspiracy, it doesn't require them to go to jail or prison or anything like that.
Thank you, Mutaki. Mutaki, can you say if the prosecution is saying anything about what kind of sentence they're seeking?
We have not heard anything yet since the trial. Prior to the trial, they were asking for a plea, and they would agree to, I want to say it was a year for Penny and Jesse and 3 years for the chairman. I want to say that was the offer in the beginning. I assume that they will come in and asking for the same thing, or more. Usually they ask for more after a trial.
Okay. That's okay. Well, the question was, what happens during the appeal process? Does the judge have options to let you stay out on appeal? Do you have to do another bond? How does that work?
So yeah, so after the sentencing, we can ask for what they call an appellate bond, and typically they're usually given if there are genuine issues that we could appeal. I think in this case we have genuine issues that we can appeal, so I think the court will have good grounds in order to give an appellate bond if there is a prison sentence attached to it.
Okay. Well, we don't have any more questions from St. Pete. Do we have any other questions from St. Louis?
Yes.
Uhuru, Uhuru, this is Stephanie in St. Louis. I just also really want to salute and appreciate that presentation, Attorney Akbar, so much.
Thank you.
And my question is, I'm just wondering if you know, during the trial of Marcus Garvey, Paul Robeson, and W. Boyd, if there was a movement, a coalition that was built, like what has been done in the leadership of Chairman and the party and the movement here, if there is that kind of organization happening, or if there wasn't. I'm just wondering what the situation.
It was with especially with the Panthers. There was a lot of fundraising, from celebrities on down. And there was a huge movement behind the Panther 21 for that trial. And throughout the trial too, for that whole 8 month process, there was a entire movement behind that. Du Bois as well, of course. For his trial, he, like I said, he traveled throughout the country. He had, really top name people that was willing to testify and help him on that. So it created a movement as well. Probably not an organized movement as far as an organization, but it was a movement as well behind Du Bois. With Garvey, I didn't see as much, but I'm sure with the UNIA, the organization that was already in place, a lot of them stood behind him, even though that the government, a part of the prosecution was to, say, hey, this is not the guy who y'all think he was. He was really defrauding you all and not working for you all. So I'm sure he lost some support during that trial. But I believe he still had, a strong group of people behind him as well. So there was strong community support for all of them, and a continuous movement throughout from indictment into the end. But just like, and I'm sure there were some people who saw this indictment against the Uhuru Three and just like, yep, look, I told y'all they weren't about the work of the people, or they working for Russian government. So of course you'll get some dissenters. But I think it also speaks volumes that it's still a movement that's in place now. And I think it's even more important for that movement to stay solid in order to, again, show as an example to the government that, you can't break down this movement by your indictment or even your conviction.
Any other questions in St. Louis?
Yes, this is Louis, and I want to also appreciate Attorney Bataki Akbar's presentation, and I too hope that we're able to get it out in the world more widely so that people can really understand what happened in the case of the Uhuru Three, and that it isn't anything new. What you spoke to was the character reference letters. You mentioned those, and I was wondering if you could just help those that are listening everywhere, really help them to understand how important and how significant it is that people really participate in this process and send in a character reference letter, one for Chairman Amalia Satella, for Penny Hess, as well as Jesse Nell.
Okay. Yes. And we've received tons of them already. I think Jesse has close to 50 letters right now, and so what we're going to do is, so just to kind of give people an idea of the process, the probation office, or they put together what they call a pre-sentence report. And so they did what they call a pre-sentence investigation. That's when they talk to each client and get their background and who they are, and kind of a template. And they put that template together and they present that to the judge. But a lot of stuff that they put in there is, like I said, just basic. Did you go to college? Did you go to high school? Do you have a history of drugs or criminal, or, you know, the basics of who they are. The purpose of these letters is to really say who these people are. So the judge can really get to know them beyond that template and beyond that indictment. And so, so the letters that we've been getting, which are powerful, not only says, hey, judge, be lenient, but also, I heard Jesse speak at this event, And I've seen him work in the community, and he's been able to pull people in and get them working, even if they're not a part of the organization. You know, Penny has been instrumental in, you know, mentorship or building businesses and working with this business. And the chairman has changed my life. You know, like all those kind of letters and really, you know, like again, like not form letters, but detailed letters are really helpful in letting the judge know, letting the judge know who Jesse Neville is, Penny Hess is, and you know, Amali Yeshitela is beyond just reading their names on that paperwork. Um, because like it's a few things that, you know, I always say that judges, the decision that the judge make when they're sentencing. One, what can they do? And then two, what should they do? Um, the what can you do is just based on law. Like I can sentence you from probation to 5 years in prison. That's the what can they do. The what should they do is, one, if I do this, like is it an effective sentence? Two, do I have to worry about this person, you know, breaking the law again, or me like having to see this person again? The should also deals with the deterrence factor, whether it deters this person or deters somebody else in the community from doing those same actions. And so when they read those letters and like really by the end of the letters, they get to say, okay, like I think I know who Jesse is. I think I know who Penny is. I think I know who Chairman O'Malley is. At this point, it humanizes each and every one of them. To the extent that you know, we hope that the judges say, like, I can't send this person to prison. And not only that I can't send them to prison, I don't want to send them to prison because of all the work that they do, because of the impact that they have on all these people, because of, you know, they just don't deserve it. So the letters are important to show that. And so the package of letters that we get, we're hoping to give to probation, so they include that in their pre-sentence report. So when the judge reads through all the background and everything that's in his template that they're required to give, they'll also read all these letters at the same time, to get that who are these people in that. And I was talking to Jesse earlier today, and I told him it's rare that we get 5 letters, let alone 50. So if we could do 100 or more, that'd be even more phenomenal. And I have not met a judge yet that said, I got all these letters and I didn't read them all. So I think we will be giving the judge some work to do, but I guarantee you he will read every single line of those letters. And I really do believe that it'll have a strong impact on what the sentencing decision would be as well. And not only the judge, the prosecutor as well, because the prosecutor has to read those letters. And I think it'll be difficult for them to read, you know, 50 or more letters talking about how great somebody is, and all you have is some emails that you pulled out of context to say that that they committed a crime. So I think we put those letters up against their indictment, and I think we win with that.
If you have any more questions, because we got a few comments that we wanted to read as well.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, if I can get back to it. Okay. So we had a few comments from the chairman, and we had one from Janice Kent in St. Pete. Thank you so much for this informative presentation. I was not aware of the Panthers against the government. Sounds like it could be helpful for the Uhuru movement to file such a suit. And then the chairman had 3 or 4 comments. They have already confiscated our passports, was his first comment. And we're planning to move to eliminate 951. That's the conspiracy charge and the conspiracy law. And then hopefully Attorney Mutaki will be available for planned webinars on this case, and the laws suggesting, the law supported the state. So we hope you'll be available for future webinars as well.
For sure.
And the chairman also commented that scores of thousands held regular protest marches for Marcus Garvey. So it was thousands of people doing that. So
Good.
I really want to appreciate the comments from the chairman and Janice Camp. And I see Jesse. Jesse, did you have a comment or question?
Yes, Uhuru, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Attorney Mutaki Akbar as well for the brilliant presentation and for the magnificent job that you've done defending the Uhuru 3 in this case, along with the rest of our amazing legal team. And of course, salute the leadership of Chairman Amalia Chatella. And, you know, just again, thank you for the history that you laid out and the context that you gave for the significance of the case of the Uhuru 3, as Penny stated. And just two quick things I wanted to mention. Yeah, just to, you know, reinforce the comment the chairman was making about 951 and that this campaign that the chairman is talking about launching for the repealing of 951, the foreign agent law that was used against the Uhuru 3, along with the Foreign Agent Registration Act. I think that's a really exciting idea, a really important idea and campaign to take on to show how a victory in this case is an example that exposes the political nature of that law and how it's been used by the US government historically to attack African freedom fighters, you know, including Du Bois and many others, and other organizations that have spoken out against the US government. And then I also wanted to see Attorney Akbar, if you could talk a little bit about the other aspect of the verdict. And, you know, just what your thoughts are on how that came about and what it means. Because, you know, it's pretty obviously nonsensical that we would be guilty of conspiring to act as Russian agents without notifying the Attorney General, but not guilty of acting as Russian agents without notifying the Attorney General. And in your closing arguments, you really tried to help the jury understand that, as you put it, that a conspiracy is not just a partnership or an agreement. It's a partnership or an agreement to commit an unlawful act. And the unlawful act they said we conspired to commit is the one they found us not guilty of. So, if, you know, give your thoughts on that. I know there's going to be a lot more said when we get into the whole appeal process, but at this stage, whatever you want to share on that subject.
Yeah, I do think it was inconsistent. I think, like if for those who saw the trial, the first prosecutor who spoke, he I think it was intentional, and we've talked about this as well. He focused so much on, you know, the parts of the case that talked about this is an agreement, you know, we're allies, you know, this is a partnership. They focused so much on that, just and then they pulled that out and then pulled out the language of the statute that says a conspiracy is an agreement, and just kind of left out the part that it's an agreement to commit a specific crime. And so what we think is that they just saw agreement as like, okay, it was an agreement, so it's a conspiracy. They probably had issues with some of the language that was used in like emails and stuff like that to say, okay, like they had no problem working with the Russians, but didn't understand that the Russians couldn't commit the crime. It had to been us to commit the crime. I'm sorry, of working with the Russians and not the Russians committing the crime and working with us. So I think it's some confusion. I think it's some inconsistencies there, and I think that's going to be a strong part of our appeal as well, to do it. So even though the jury got it right as far as like finding us not guilty of being Russian agents, I think they were confused or probably like just wanted to find something based on the facts. And so they kind of went with the conspiracy charge because of that.
We had a question from YouTube from a Black woman. And in the music festival, and she asked, had you given any thought to going to the international court?
We haven't. And so there's not, I guess, like a direct line to an international court when it comes down to criminal cases. We can appeal it to the appellate level, and then if the appellate court either, if the appellate court upholds the district court's decision, then we can go to the Supreme Court. But I guess we can always petition to an international court, but I have not seen a path where a criminal case ended up in the international court. Maybe other than to petition, like the chairman suggested, petition repealing the 951.
Is there any other questions in St. Louis? Okay, I don't see any other questions in St. Louis. I do want to thank Attorney Mutaki Akbar. Thank St. Louis for joining me in this broadcast.
Okay, we do have one more question.
Okay, we got a late question coming in.
Okay. Another question. Go ahead.
Copyright. I have a question. I would like to challenge every member of the Black is Back Coalition to make sure that they get at least half of their members of their organization to sit their butt down and write a letter. These people have put their lives online for all of us. And this is serious. This should not be an option. We are unified and we need to show it. And so everybody, every organization that's a member of the Black is Back Coalition, you benefit off of the education y'all tell us has given us. You benefit off of everything that everybody do. I'm calling you out. At least half of your members.
All of them.
All of them, really. But at least half of them, because this could be any one of us. We know they come in the morning, they come in the evening, and then they come at night for you. And we need to make that happen. Sit down, write the letter for each and every one of the Uhuru 3, because they put their life, their freedom online for us. And this is no joke. I'm copyright, and that's right, I said it.
Oh, appreciate that. Right. Again, Attorney Mutaki Akbar, I really want to thank you for that really informative presentation. It was really excellent, and I agree with Penny. It should be put on as many websites and other areas where we can get it out into the world to really publicize the whole question of free speech and particularly impact cases.
Okay, I'll put it in a better format and send it over.
Okay, okay. Well, we appreciate it. Well, it's a pretty good format, though. I mean, we can use the video probably. Yeah, I really want to thank you and just thank you for the excellent job you did in the trial. So. So at this point, we're going to cut off the broadcast to St. Louis. I want to thank St. Louis for this meeting. Uhuru.
Comrade, we do have a little bit of culture that we want to share with the broadcast coming from St. Louis. So just before we sign off with you, we take this opportunity to have our comrade Kofi Akibalon to come to our stage and present us with a bit of culture. Uhuru.
Uhuru, comrade. This piece is called Stolen People. And Chairman O'Malley has taught me. I want to talk about stolen people. I am a stolen African woman born on stolen indigenous land. Stolen family roots and connections to Africa.
Our dignity, pride, and traditions, along with our customs, practices, and medical cures, our skills, beliefs, and riches have been tainted. Our history is being erased. General humanity challenged and lives ripped away. Melanin makes us African, regardless of where we are born. Omali Yeshitela told me we would not be here if they had not been there. He taught me about the colonial mode of production, a dependent relationship to keep Africa drained and the colonizers rich. To change this relationship is to free Africa and its people. To be self-governed and self-reliant. Even free speech was not meant for stolen people. It's against the law for stolen people to be free. Colonialism is the cause. Revolution is the cure. See, I am a stolen African woman born on stolen indigenous land, and my DNA is under siege everywhere we exist in this world. Uhuru in Swahili is freedom. Sasa means now. Uhuru Sasa. Uhuru Sasa. To all colonialized people of the world. This poem was written and given to a group of people that did not know the situation we were dealing with. And at the end of it, I said, Omali Yeshitela is the chairman of the Uhuru movement. And the FBI has charged him and two of our other leaders for working to free Black people. The government can't handle the truth. Uhuru, comrade.
Uhuru!